Right now, your brain is using about 20% of all the energy your body produces. It never stops. Even while you sleep, it's firing, repairing, dreaming, running the quiet machinery that makes you you. Now imagine that machinery loses power. Your heart stops, blood stops moving, and the most complex object in the known universe, 86 billion neurons, wired by a lifetime of experience, begins to shut down. You'd assume the lights just go out. A switch flips, and there's nothing. But that's not what the data shows. Because in the seconds after your heart stops, your brain doesn't go quiet. It does something almost no one expects. It comes alive, in a way it may never have done while you were living. And what it does in those final 30 seconds might be the strangest thing science has ever recorded about being human. For most of history, we had no way to know. Death was a closed door. You walked up to it, you went through, and nobody came back with a report. But in 2022, almost entirely by accident, a team of doctors recorded it. They captured the electrical activity of a human brain in the exact moment it crossed from alive to dead. Nobody had ever planned to. Nobody thought it was even possible. And what they found suggests that the last thing your brain may ever do is play back your life. Let's walk through it second by second. The patient was an 87-year-old man. He'd had a fall, developed bleeding in the brain, and started having seizures. So doctors hooked him up to an EEG, a cap of electrodes that reads the brain's electrical activity in real time, to monitor those seizures. While the machine was running, the man had a heart attack, and he died, right there, mid-recording, which meant that for the first time ever, a machine was watching a human brain in the 15 minutes around death, 30 seconds before the heart stopped, and 30 seconds after. The neurosurgeon who led the analysis, Dr. Ajmal Zema, said they were stunned by what they saw. They expected the signal to fade to a flat line. Instead, right as the heart stopped, the brain produced a surge of a very specific kind of activity. To understand why that's so haunting, you need to know what that activity normally means. Your brain runs on rhythms, waves of electrical activity at different speeds. Slow waves when you're in deep sleep, faster ones when you're alert. The fastest of all are called gamma waves, and gamma waves aren't background noise. They show up during your most intense mental activity, concentration, dreaming, and, most importantly, memory retrieval. Gamma is the signature of your brain pulling up a memory and reliving it. In that dying man, in the second around his heart stopping, the brain didn't fade. It fired a burst of gamma, the exact pattern your brain produces when you're remembering. Let that land. The neural fingerprint of recalling your life appeared at the precise moment that life was ending. The researchers couldn't ask him what he experienced. He was gone. But they wrote something extraordinary in their paper. They suggested the brain may be doing one final thing, a last recall of important life events. The same thing people report in near-death experiences. The life flashing before your eyes. For centuries we called it a metaphor. This was the first time a machine had ever caught the brain in the act of possibly doing it. One patient is a story. It's not proof. A single accidental recording could be a glitch, a dying artifact, noise from a damaged brain. The researchers knew this. So did everyone who read it. And here's where it gets stranger. Because it had already been seen. In animals. Back in 2013, a scientist named Jamor Borjajan at the University of Michigan was studying rats at the moment of cardiac arrest. She expected the brain to simply power down. Instead, in the 30 seconds after the heart stopped, the rats' brains lit up with a surge of synchronized gamma activity, more organized than when they were awake and alive. A dying brain, for a few seconds, became more connected than a living one. Then in 2023, Borjajan's team did it with dying humans, patients removed from life support, with family permission. In some of them, the same thing happened. As oxygen drained away, a region scientists called a hot zone of consciousness didn't shut down. It blazed. 2 species, multiple studies, the same impossible signal. The pattern was real. So what's actually happening, physically, in those final moments? Here's the timeline. The instant blood flow stops. Your neurons keep firing, but they are running on a reserve tank. The brain stores almost no energy of its own. Within about 10 seconds, oxygen drops low enough that you lose consciousness. This is why a person whose heart suddenly stops collapses almost immediately. But losing consciousness is not the same as a brain being dead. Underneath, the neurons are still alive, still holding their electrical charge, fighting to keep order. Then comes a part scientists find almost beautiful and deeply eerie. As the energy finally runs out, the brain appears to release one last coordinated burst, that gamma surge, possibly as the neurons fire off their final signals all at once. Some researchers describe the very end of this as a single slow wave that rolls across the brain as the cells give up their charge together. They've nicknamed it the wave of death. After that wave passes, the electrical activity flattens. But even then, the neurons aren't instantly destroyed. For minutes, the cells are still physically intact. This is the entire reason CPI exists, why someone can be clinically dead, with no pulse, and still be brought back with their mind intact. The brain doesn't die in an instant. It dies in stages. And there is a window. Now the hardest question, the one the data can't fully reach. If the brain is producing the signature of memory recall in those final seconds, is someone still in there experiencing it? We don't know, and we have to be honest about that. A gamma surge tells us the machinery of remembering switched on. It can't tell us whether there was a you present to feel it. But there's a reason this keeps scientists up at night. A doctor named Sam Parney has spent years studying cardiac arrest survivors, people who were, by every clinical definition, dead and then came back. A small but consistent number described the same things. A feeling of peace, a review of their life, often from the outside, often without judgment, an awareness that continued after their heart had already stopped. For a long time, this was dismissed as hallucination, a dying brain telling itself stories. But the new recordings complicate that easy answer. Because the brain activity needed to form those experiences appears to genuinely be there. In the moment we assume there was nothing, we're left with a possibility that's hard to even hold in your head. That death may not be an instant edge you fall off, but a final, vivid experience. One last flood of memory in the dark. Here's what all of this leaves us with. You spend your whole life convinced the ending is the empty part, the fade, the nothing, the thing to be afraid of. But the recordings hint at something else. That in your last 30 seconds, with a heart already still and the world already gone, your brain may turn inward and do the most human thing it has ever done. Reach back through everything you ever lived, every face you loved, every ordinary afternoon you thought you'd forgotten, and play it one final time. Not for anyone else. Not for a camera or a record. Just for you. A private screening. In the dark, of the only life you ever had, we spend so much of that life certain there will be time to look back later. The brain seems to know there won't. So maybe the strange comfort buried in all this data is simple. The looking back already has its moment, guaranteed, waiting at the very end for every single one of us. The only question the science can't answer is what you will have given it to play.